Hi, fourth grade social studies. I hope you guys are doing well as always. Recently, you have been studying westward expansion. Last week, you learned about the need for westward expansion, the Louisiana Purchase. We also started to learn about two explorers named Lewis and Clark, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. And they were given a very big job, a big task by Thomas Jefferson to go explore the West and to document all the things that they had found so that they knew that the West was safe for citizens to explore and that they would kind of expect, or they would know what to expect when they moved west. Today, we're going to talk about a very important part of Lewis and Clark's journey. We are going to give credit to a woman who is incredibly brave and to a woman who helped Lewis and Clark so much, to the fact that we owe her an incredible amount of gratitude for allowing us to explore the West. Our objective is to describe the important role of Sacagawea. Some people call her Sacagawea, okay? And there are multiple spellings. Some people spell it with a G, some people spell it with a J. So we're going to describe her role. Of course, you probably have heard of her before. You've probably learned about her a little bit, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail into her life. I'm going to share my screen with you all, and I'll let you know what you need. Okay, so my very first question is, who is this woman? Of course, this is a statue of Sacagawea. And what you may know about her is you may know that she did have a child on the journey west while helping Lewis and Clark explore. His nickname was Pompey, and Clark gave him that nickname, Pompey. You may also know that she was Native American and she was a part of the Shoshone tribe, which means that she lived in Idaho. Okay. And you may know that she helped to interpret for Lewis and Clark when they came across other Native Americans. You may also know that she helped them learn the land and different planting methods, which is super cool. But there is a part of her life that is a little bit more mysterious, of which you may not know about her. So, what you may not know is she was actually kidnapped at the age of 12, and she was sold. She was kidnapped by another Native American man, and was then sold to a French Canadian fur trader. And she was only 12 years old, so she was taken from her home in Idaho with the Shoshone tribe. She was only a young teen when she was married to the French fur trader. She didn't really have a choice in that matter. She helped save Lewis and Clark's important articles, and they were caught in a boat accident, and all their documents and papers went flying into the ocean. She just dove right in and helped save them. And she lived a very short life. She died at the age of only 25, and her death is mysterious as well. Before we move on to our article about Sacagawea, I want to share with you a quote that is actually from the real journals of Lewis and Clark. And they mention her quite a few times. They actually mention the very day that she gave birth to her baby boy. And they said that that was very, very excruciatingly painful for her. She had to keep on going. Here's what they say at the bottom. The Indian woman to whom I ascribe equal fortitude and resolution with any person on board at the time of the accident caught and preserved most of the light articles which were washed overboard. So that's how we get the story of her jumping in and gathering all these articles that were almost lost and swept beneath the ocean. So super cool. That's a real quote from the diary. You are going to need this article right here, Meet Sacagawea. I sent this to your parents. We're going to read this article, and then we're going to watch a video together and then take a short online quiz about her life. Okay? Remember, we're looking for the importance of her role. How did she help Lewis and Clark, and why should we honor her as a brave woman of our history? Sacagawea has an incredible life story. She was born around 1788 in Idaho. At 12 years old, she was kidnapped from her village. Then she was sold as a slave to a French fur trapper named Toussaint Charbonneau. What they left out is not only was she sold as a slave to him, but she was also forced to marry him. Many years later, when Lewis and Clark were exploring the West, they met Sacagawea. Lewis and Clark learned that Sacagawea knew how to speak several Native American languages, so they hired her as an interpreter or translator so they could communicate easily with the Native Americans. Sacagawea and her husband traveled with the team while carrying her newborn baby on her back. She ended up helping them in many important ways. They knew the land well and served as a guide, showing Lewis and Clark the best routes to take. Sacagawea taught them which plants were safe to eat and to use as medicines. She also negotiated with different tribes along the way and was able to get supplies and horses for them from the Shoshone tribe. Now, in the journal from Lewis and Clark, Lewis mentions that having a woman with them was very helpful because when they came as two white men that looked very different from Native Americans, the Native Americans might perceive those two men as maybe harmful or dangerous or violent. And oftentimes women of those days were not associated with any of those. And so having Sacagawea as this female presence with them was actually helpful because she was more like of a calming, peaceful presence to say like, hey, we come in peace, we're not here to harm you. 6 years after the Lewis and Clark expedition, on December 22nd, 1812, Sacagawea died. She was only 25 years old. Today, she is remembered as a famous interpreter who traveled thousands of miles through the wilderness helping Lewis and Clark, and she took them all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So if we look back at our objective, we have to describe the important role of Sacagawea. Well, without her, Lewis and Clark wouldn't have been able to have good communication with the Native American tribes as they were moving across the West. They also wouldn't have known which crops were best for medicine and for planting. Okay, so she made their trip a lot more bearable. Okay, all right, now what we're going to do, I'm going to pull up a video. And I'm going to share my screen again. And it's one of the TED Ed videos, which I love. Okay, make sure the sound is up.
You might think you know a lot about Native Americans through popular movies, books, and classes in school, but it turns out that a lot of what we think we know about famous Native American figures isn't quite right. Take Sacagawea, for example. You probably remember her as a beautiful Indian woman who lived an exotic life, serving as the all-knowing guide for Lewis and Clark's famous expedition, right?
She looks like Pocahontas there, doesn't she?
Well, that's not exactly how it happened. Not much is known about Sacagawea's early childhood, but we do know that she was born in 1788 into the Agatica tribe of the Lemhi Shoshone in what is now Idaho. In 1800, when she was about 12 years old, Sacagawea and several other girls were kidnapped by a group of Hidatsu Indians. She was taken as a captive to a Hidatsu village in present-day North Dakota. Then she was sold to a French-Canadian fur trapper named Toussaint Charbonneau. Within a year or so, she was pregnant with their first child. Soon after she became pregnant, the Corps of Discovery arrived near the Hidatsu villages. Captains Meriwether Lewis and William Clark built Fort Mandan there, and then started interviewing people to help guide them on their perilous expedition. They agreed to hire Sacagawea's husband, Charbonneau, with the understanding that his lovely wife would also come along as an interpreter. They figured her very presence would help any encounters with native tribes along the way. As Clark noted in his journal, a woman with a party of men is a token of peace. Shortly thereafter, Sacagawea gave birth to a little boy named Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau.
Try saying that. Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. Remember that her husband is French, so that's why we're getting all these French names.
Clark called him Pompey. She carried Pompey on a board strapped to her back as the Corps of Discovery forged on. Besides interpreting the language when Lewis and Clark encountered Indians, Sacagawea's activities as a member of the Corps included digging for roots, collecting edible plants, and picking berries. In 1805, the boat they were riding in was capsized. She dove into the water, recovering all the important papers and supplies that would otherwise have been lost, including the journals and records of Lewis and Clark. Later that year, Captain Lewis and 3 men scouted 75 miles ahead of the expedition's main party, crossing the Continental Divide. The next day, they encountered a group of Shoshones. Not only did they prove to be Sacagawea's band, but their leader, Chief Kamehameha, turned out to be her very own brother. After 5 years of separation since her kidnapping as a young girl, Sacagawea and Kamehameha had an emotional reunion. Unfortunately, she quickly had to bid farewell to her beloved brother and continue on with the journey. At one point, the expedition became so difficult and freezing, the group was reduced to eating candles to survive. When temperatures finally became more bearable, Sacagawea found, dug, and cooked roots to help the group regain their strength. On the return trip, they encountered an Indian wearing a beautiful fur robe. Lewis and Clark wanted to bring the robe to Thomas Jefferson as a gift, but had nothing to trade for it. So, Sacagawea agreed to trade her most precious possession, her beaded belt, for the fur. A little over 2 years after the expedition began, it was finally over, ending in St. Louis. Today, we learn about Sacagawea in school as a heroic guide, but her life, like most everyone's, was much more complicated than history books sometimes give her credit for.
Very good. All right, so now after that, we are going to take a quick quiz. Okay, so I'm going to read the question. You pause, answer it in your head or out loud, and then we will see what grade we get. It's an online quiz. Number 1. In what modern-day U.S. state was Sacagawea born? Take a look at your article, or if you remember. Okay, number 2, I chose Idaho. Number 2, when was Sacagawea born? 1788, 1803, 1845, 1890, or 1901? I choose 1788. Number 3, what is Sacagawea most known for? Exploring the South Pacific, mapping the Hudson River and the North Atlantic, being a guide and interpreter for explorers Lewis and Clark, traveling to China and the Far East, or saving colonist John Smith? I think 3, being a guide and interpreter. Number 4, what Native American tribe was Sacagawea a member of as a child? The Cherokee, Shoshone, Blackfoot, Osage, or Seminole? Shoshone. Number 5, who was Toussaint Charbonneau? Was he a Shoshone chief, Sacagawea's child, a Blackfoot warrior, a French trapper who owned Sacagawea, or none of the above? I say a French trapper who owned Sacagawea and later became her husband, unfortunately. Number 6, what explorers did Sacagawea join on their way out west? This one is simple. Lewis and Clark. Number 7, how was Sacagawea able to help in the journey west? She taught them what plants and roots they could eat. She rescued some important supplies when a boat capsized, which means flipped over. She could interpret between the explorers and the Native Americans. All of the above or none of the above? All of the above. Number 8, who did Sacagawea meet when she met with the Shoshone people during the trip west? So who did she run into who she hadn't seen in years? Sister, mother, father, uncle, brother? Brother. Number 9, how far west did Sacagawea go with the Lewis and Clark expedition? So she took them all the way to Idaho, the Pacific Ocean, Montana, Wyoming, the Rocky Mountains. The Pacific Ocean is my choice. And number 10, true or false? Sacagawea brought her 2-month-old son on the journey to the West Coast. True. All right, let's submit our answers. Done. Yay, we got a 100%. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. So we know that Sacagawea was a very important figure for Lewis and Clark in order for them to have success on their journey, so that we were able to not only explore the West, but start to civilize the West, and so people could start moving there. Okay, and they became great guides for people. That's all I have for you for social studies today. I hope you have a great rest of your day.